What's up, Jets fans, and welcome to another edition of JetNation Live. We are your hosts, Dylan Terman and Chris Schubert. I hope everybody's having a fantastic Thursday, except for Asante Samuel and Warren Sharp. We are 6 days now away from players reporting to camp. Can't get here soon enough. Tired of the drama, tired of the hate. We have good news, we have some drama news, and we're going to continue our summer series of ranking the players. We have the Playmakers today. Chris, how are we doing tonight?
We're doing good, and I can guarantee here on this show right now that we know for a fact one player that is going to show up to training camp on time. There are going to be no more worries about a guy holding out into training camp. Some fantastic news today about Quinnen Williams that I think we all deep down knew was coming at some point. Glad to see it got done before training camp began, and Jets fans can now breathe a sigh of relief and then move on to their next thing that they want to gripe about, which is probably Aaron Rodgers' contract situation.
I was just going to say, I think the next thing up on the docket is the Aaron Rodgers deal or the contract workings, the details of that deal. But first, the big news of the day came down about 2 o'clock in the afternoon today. I wasn't able to hop on with Glenn's solo show. If you were able to catch that, that's awesome. After this show, you can go back and watch his solo show about the Quinnen Williams deal. But yes, we locked up one of our few homegrown players. Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle, gets a 4-year, $96 million extension on top of his 5th-year option that he's playing on this year. So he is a free agent after the 2027 season. I think he'll be 29 at that point. He's in his 25 season now. So a huge deal for him, right in the ballpark of where we thought, $95 to $100 million. We thought maybe even a little more based on how long this was, drawing out. I got the first little rumblings of it based on a Twitter bio change that people seem to be monitoring with Quinnen Williams.
Back. And he was back to being an interior defensive lineman for the New York Jets. And so everyone was like, that means they must have signed him because he wasn't an interior defensive lineman for the New York Jets up until this point. He had removed it from his Twitter. I can't keep up with that kind of stuff. Just let me know if he signed or not. That was what I was waiting on.
Kudos to the people that do monitor that stuff. But exactly. Nonetheless, Quinnen Williams is signed. Huge deal. Chris, what are your immediate thoughts coming out of this deal?
Listen, this was going to get done, right? And I know it's easier said than done now that it actually has happened, but I've been pretty steadfast and pretty consistent in that this was going to get done. Joe Douglas said as much that they wanted to take care of Q. Robert Saleh during OTAs was like literally looked at the media and said, it's going to get done. Like they made it very clear that Quinnen Williams was part of the long-term plans for the New York Jets. I've been very clear on this. Quinnen Williams is the best interior defensive lineman not named Aaron Donald in the National Football League. That's how highly I view Quinnen Williams, and I think that's how highly Jets fans view Quinnen Williams. I'll just give you some statistics. The $96 million for this contract is the most given to any player in the interior D-line. It beat Aaron Donald. Now, Aaron Donald got $95 million over 3 seasons, where Quinnen's is over 4. On an average annual per year basis, the $24 million that this contract breaks down into is the highest to anybody not named Aaron Donald. This is in front of Jeffrey Simmons, who signed a contract this offseason. This is in front of Deron Payne, who signed a contract extension this offseason. It is in front of Dexter Lawrence, who signed a contract extension this offseason. So Quinnen Williams slots in right where we all thought he was going to from a money perspective. It's more dollars overall than Aaron Donald because it's for more years. And from a per-year basis, it is the highest non-Aaron Donald number in the National Football League. This made total sense. I'm surprised it didn't get to 100. I thought for sure that that's probably where it would have gotten to. The fact that it didn't, kudos to everybody involved for getting this done. And now we can just move on. Quinnen Williams going to be on the Jets in 2023 with the 5th-year option. No concerns about him holding out. No concerns about him not showing up to training camp on time. And now the focus, although I thought the focus was always going to be on this, the focus for Quinnen Williams and the New York Jets can be on playing their best version of football that they can play in 2023 to try to win a championship. But it's glad to be done. Put it in the rearview mirror, move on. This deal is fine from a financial perspective. Q gets to stay here for a really long time until he's almost 30 years old. He's going to be a homegrown, hometown Jet. I mean, it's awesome from that regard. Happy that this got done. But again, I don't really think any of us should be really surprised that this happened. All of the warning signs were there that they were going to get this done sooner rather than later.
Exactly. Unless the cap numbers are just completely inflated to a point where we didn't expect them to be, which is not in Joe Douglas's realm. And that's just hasn't been the norm of the contracts. This is exactly what most Jets fans were expecting it to be. And I thought, like you said, $100 million was kind of like where I was going with it. I thought he was going to be the first $100 million player in franchise history. Obviously, he gets a huge deal. 24 average per year is the most the team's ever given out in history. I believe the only contract close to this is the Muhammad Wilkerson deal. We're not looking at that situation here. This is a completely different type of player. interior guy with 12 sacks last year, second year in the system. He's only going to get better from here. So I agree. This is kind of basically what you want.
The one thing I'll add on this that I'm just intrigued by, right, is everyone is phrasing it as a 4-year contract extension. And there's kind of been, at least from what I've read, at least from what I've seen and heard, that this contract extension doesn't start until 2024, which means the 2023 year, the 5th-year option, is not included in that. So the thing that I'm intrigued because of the verbiage. It's being referred to as a 4-year contract extension. Is that wrapping in the 5th year, or is it on top of the 5th year? I've heard it where it feels like it's on top of the 5th-year option, so it's 4 years after this year. But again, until we see the inner workings of the contract, we don't really know how many years this includes. That'll change things like, does it impact the 2023 cap number? Does it change their flexibility? That changes what the cap numbers look like for the first couple of years of the deal. So a lot of that, we're not going to be able to get into the weeds on until we see. Again, it's being phrased as an extension, but an extension could be we're taking your existing last year on your deal and wrapping it in, or it can be an extension on top of the year that you're currently here for. So it can be construed in a couple of different ways. And I don't know if there's a firm answer on which way the contract is being structured. We'll just have to wait and see. But again, Q's here for a really long time. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point because his 5th-year option is fully guaranteed. So if they do wrap it into this extension, are they able to bring that number down or rework that number for this year specifically? Because I feel like this is the year in question where they're trying to clear up as many dollars as possible. I know the Aaron Rodgers deal is going to take some of those dollars, but it seems like this year is the year where everybody's trying to get the low dollar amount, at least from the Jets' perspective. So are they going to kick the can down the road, or are they going to try to, work firm with that 5th-year option number? I think that's really important.
Well, I'll just add, I did a quick look up of this while you were talking to see if anything else had come out since I had first done a deep dive on this. The New York Post, the first story that came up, but I clicked on them, and it says Williams is now under contract through the 2027 season. Well, that would mean that it's 4 years after this season.
Plus.
So it's 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, and then 2027. So it's actually going to cover 4 years beyond the 5th-year option. Because if it's a 4-year extension, if you do the math on he's going to be a Jet through the 2027 season, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, there's your 4 years. So they didn't do anything with this current year on the deal. So you've got him for this year, and then you've got him for 4 more years, and that's a great thing. So yeah, this is a home run for everybody. Win-win. Good for Q. He's played great. Has done everything that's been asked of him ever since he got in this building. And for a Jets organization that has not had a ton of draft picks pan out in the context of earning a second contract over the last couple of years, these are the types of things we should be celebrating as Jets fans, that they hit on a draft pick. He has become one of the best players at his position, and he has signed a second contract with the New York Jets. Those things haven't happened very often, at least in my lifetime as a Jets fan. These are the moments that we should be celebrating, specifically with a player like Q, who has just been awesome since he's gotten here to New York.
Exactly. It's such a rarity to see that second contract get paid out to a player that's homegrown for the Jets. So Quinnen is absolutely deserving of that. A little personal note before we move on. Quinnen was the first player I ever scouted from a perspective of watching prospects from like that lens. So Quinnen Williams was the first guy. I kind of planted my flag in him. I didn't have him higher than Nick Bosa that year, but he was my guy, and I was so happy when the Jets got him at 3. I know there was rumors that the Jets might trade out that year, or Buffalo could come up and take Quinnen Williams. I remember there's a lot of drama around Quinnen Williams to the Jets, and I was a huge fan of it. So glad to see it all come full circle for him, because it avoids another holdout on HBO's premier training camp show, Hard Knocks, which the Jets have now been forced to do. I'm glad the Q stuff is not going to be involved. Let's focus on as much football as possible. I like the drama storylines when they're not the Jets, when they're covering other teams. But when it's the Jets, I just want to see the football, man. I just want to go see those hard hits, the coaches cursing and not getting bleeped out. So I'm really excited. I know you're not a huge fan of Hard Knocks, so we can kind of brush on the topic, but they were forced to do it. They were one of 4 teams, the Bears, the Saints, and the Commanders. And obviously the Jets are the sexiest team of all 4 of those. So it's kind of obvious, but any thoughts on Hard Knocks being forced on the Jets?
Yeah, they were always going to be the pick, right? They were always going to be the team that HBO wanted for this. I mean, you don't need to just understand this from a strictly football perspective, that the New York Jets are the more entertaining of the teams that could have been forced into this, but just look at this from a media and HBO perspective. You have a lot of people right now that are choosing to do other things with their time instead of streaming things on HBO. Insert whatever media company you want. They are trying to generate eyeballs. Well, guess what? The thing that's going to generate HBO the most eyeballs and getting people to sign up for Max or doing whatever needs to be done in order to see Hard Knocks is having Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets as their team for Hard Knocks. They were always going to be the team because it made the most football sense and it made the most business sense for HBO. So not surprised. I've shared my thoughts on Hard Knocks before. I'm not going to sit down and watch it now that the Jets are on there. I didn't watch it when it was Rex leading the team. I'm certainly not going to do it now. And in today's society, in today's social media with Threads and TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, the things I'm going to need to see from this show are going to immediately be put on the internet, and I will be caught up by the time the next day starts, and I will not have to sat down and watched and gone through maybe some of the more boring parts. So I'm good. I'll be skipping out on it, but I will see all the important things on social media.
I respect that. And I thought it was awesome that One Jets Drive came out and said that they're going to be premiering their shows Monday nights every week because Hard Knocks does come out on Tuesday nights. So I thought that was awesome. Everybody's going to still be talking about One Jets Drive. So it's going to be funny to see what kind of content One Jets Drive puts out compared to HBO, because obviously they're two separate businesses. One is like super team filtered. One really kind of has more liberty to post other things that, I think the team has to sign off on everything as it is, but it's going to be interesting to see the differences in the content. All right, we can get into the summer ranking series now. We have a loaded one today. We have running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. We're getting into all of them. Which one's Rodgers' preferred target? How is this running back room going to play out? There's tons of questions. I think we're going to start right there with the running back room. Like we did last week, we're going to start from the bottom of the depth chart up, So we're going to start with the guys that are probably fringe roster guys. We have 5 current running backs on the roster. But first, let's talk a little bit about their coaching. John Taylor Embry, he's been on since 2021, which is Saleh's original staff. He's the running backs coach. And really, there's not too much, glitz and glam about him. He's kind of an underlying, assistant coach or positional coach that doesn't really get talked about, but it seems like he has a lot of praise inside the building. When it came to the final 53, I projected 4. I don't know how many running backs you projected on the 53, but I think it's easily 4.
Yeah, 4.
Exactly. And potential for practice squad stash, if not a roster ad from a team that cuts somebody and then they stash that guy. So we can get into it right from there. Number 5 on the list, or on the depth chart, so to speak, is Travis Dye, undrafted free agent from the 2023 NFL draft class out of USC. Last year in 10 games with the Trojans, he had 145 carries, 885 yards, 9 touchdowns, and added 202 receiving yards. This year, his cap hit is $752,000, 78th on the team. I have him as a practice squad / cut. Think this is kind of cut and dry. How about you?
It is, but not because of the talent of Travis Dye. I think this is a good player. And if the Jets didn't have a loaded running back room, I think Travis Dye would be a candidate to sneak in here as a potential RB3 or RB4 option. I just think there are other roster maneuvers that are blocking Travis Dye from being on this team. The investment that the Jets have made over the last couple of years via draft picks into 3 of the running backs that I have making this team kind of just lock out Travis Dye. This guy that was a 1,000-yard rusher 2 years ago at Oregon. Guy that was a second-team All-Pac-12 player last year for USC in the Lincoln Riley offense. This guy's productive. And when the Jets picked him up as an undrafted free agent, I thought, okay, maybe he can find his way onto the team. It's an uphill battle. And so I have him as a practice squad guy with the red tag, but not because I don't think Travis Dye is a good player. I just think he's just locked out because of the guys in front of him on the depth chart.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I feel like if Bam Knight didn't pop like he did last year and they practice squad stashed him and we never got to see him in game action, maybe that's the guy that you would think, Travis Dye could kick, off the depth chart to make that roster spot for. But yeah, I think Travis Dye is on the outside looking in, but that's not to say he couldn't have a good role if injuries mount. Breece isn't ready. They don't pick up a free agent like Dalvin Cook or Kareem Hunt or whoever's out there still. So I like Travis Dye. I agree with you there, but yeah, probably just a practice squad guy for now. That takes us to, I had Izzy ranked number 4. Like you said, rookies are net neutral. I had to put Izzy down at the bottom underneath Bam. So I have Izzy at number 4. Excuse me. I have him as the questions or rookie bucket. He's a 5th rounder from this past draft. He had 1,431 yards, which is 6 yards per carry last year for Pittsburgh, 20 touchdowns, and he added 146 yards and a touchdown through the air. Cap hit, $834,000, again, minimal. I have him as a questions rookie bucket. Obviously, he's a net neutral. but I think his projected role could increase out the gates if he has even one preseason game that's decent. And his special teams ability, because of his speed, I think he will be able to contribute something there. So he has a solid floor for me where I see him having a big role if the opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, Izzy Abanikanda, my RB4 right now on this team as well, and it is because he's a rookie, right? And we said it at the beginning, I have treated rookies, while we can look at the scouting report and we can look at the productivity from these guys coming out of college, I have to treat them as an unknown going into the 2023 season. And so for me, he gets the yellow questions tag because he's a rookie. That's the only reason why he gets this tag. And so because of that, he's RB4. Mainly because I think the three guys in front of him, I think are better, at least at this stage of their career, because Izzy is an unknown. But man, you put on the tape for Izzy, you see why the Jets loved him and took him in the 5th round. The 1,400 yards last year, he basically scored a touchdown every time he touched the ball. I mean, you said 20, it felt like it was 400. I mean, the guy just found a way to get into the end zone for that Pitt offense. And again, the Jets clearly drafted him as an extra depth option, extra piece for this running back room, potentially a hedge in 2023 against Breece Hall not being ready right away. And so where he's going to be deployed is going to be very, very dependent on where Breece Hall is in his recovery. We're starting to hear a lot of noise that, Breece Hall's hitting 25 miles per hour in the GPS in OTAs and offseason workouts. Great. That's great to see, but I got to know where we're at. Is Breece on track to being the week 1 running back for this team? I would be shocked. If Breece Hall would be ready to go in week 1. And if he is, I don't know if it'll be at fully 100%. I really don't. I think there's going to be a slow process to Breece Hall getting back to the player that he was in his rookie campaign. And Israel Abanikanda might be able to play a big role. But because it's an unknown, because he's a rookie, because we don't know about the situation, he comes in as RB4 for me.
Yeah, you said it. Every time he touched the ball was a touchdown. 20 touchdowns on 239 carries. So just under a touchdown per 12 carries last season for him. So yeah, that's just silliness. But yeah, I agree. If Breece is even slightly unhealthy to start the season, I'm not saying put him on the pup or anything, but yeah, I don't think week 1 is in the cards for him. I know they have a lot of optimism inside the building, but yeah, I think Izzy Abanikanda is going to have a pretty big role out the gates, and he could have an impact with that role. All right, next up on the list, UDFA from 2022, Bam Knight. Obviously, I have him in the questions rookie bucket, just too small of a sample size. Last year, over 7 games, 85 carries, 300 yards, 2 touchdowns, caught 13 passes on 14 targets for 100 yards and a touchdown. So he did give you something in the pass game as well. 64th on the team in cap hit with 870,000. Like I said, he's a questions or a rookie bucket. The ceiling for me is solid. If he can repeat the highs from last season, command a higher target share, potentially Rodgers likes him in the pass game. I feel like that hinges on everything. And I know it's kind of like a cliche fallback, but until we actually see Aaron Rodgers throw the passes to these guys and build a rapport, all these guys are eligible. And I think Knight gives you a solid RB2 potential, but right now I have him as RB3 behind Michael Carter.
I have a hot take that I'm going to share with the JetNation audience here on the show.
Let's go.
Zonovan Knight is the RB2 on the New York Jets entering the 2023 season. Okay? I listen, it's just how I feel. I'm sorry. But Zonovan Knight, when Breece Hall went down last year, Zonovan Knight was the better running back on the New York Jets. Zonovan Knight was better last season than Michael Carter was. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight in the same bucket. I do. They're both in this questions bucket because with Zonovan Knight, it is an extremely small sample size. And again, just like we talked about with Israel Abanikanda, I don't know what this is going to look like in week 1, so I don't know how they're going to deploy these guys. If Breece is healthy, are they going to put him on a bit of a snap count? Are they going to put him on a bit of a pitch count where he's only going to get maybe 12 to 14 carries a game in the early going? I just don't know. And so because of that, it's hard for me to see how it orders behind. But when we talk floor ceiling, the ceiling for Zonovan Knight is I think, the solid bucket, potentially into the good, great bucket because of the opportunity. If he gets opportunity because Breece isn't ready and picks up exactly where he left off last year in this offense, I think he could put up a ton of numbers. You mentioned the pass catching ability out of the backfield. We know Aaron Rodgers likes to throw to running backs. A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones feasted in that Green Bay offense catching the ball out of the backfield. And I think Zonovan Knight was the better player last year. So he's my RB2. And I'll get ahead of it because you talked about Zonovan Knight as your RB3. I have Michael Carter as my RB3, again, in the same bucket as I have Zonovan Knight, the questions bucket. And the question with Michael Carter is, who are you? Are you the guy that played in 2021 as a rookie and was one of the best players on offense for the New York Jets? Or were you the guy in 2022 when after they drafted Breece Hall and then Breece went down and you had the opportunity to show to the world that the Jets maybe, quote unquote, made a mistake by bringing in Breece Hall, you got beat out by Zonovan Knight. You were not the better running back in that running back group. Which player are you? And it is a true question because he could easily bounce back to be the player that he was in his rookie season. But also, maybe the player he was last year is the player that he is. And so because I've got 2 split years to look at that are totally opposite of each other, it's the definition of having questions. So I have him in this bucket, and I have him as the RB3 on this team going into the season. Yeah, I'm going to hang my entire claim to the 2023 season is going to hinge on whether or not Zonovan Knight is good enough to be the RB2. Like I'm going out on a limb with that, and I understand that. And in a year in which the Jets have Super Bowl aspirations, somebody's going to tweet at me in week 4 when Zonovan Knight is like not active, and they're going to be like, "Oh, is he really the RB2, Chris?" I can't wait. I'm already dreading the tweets that are going to come my way. Now, I'm going to tell you, Zonovan Knight goes off in a game for 100 yards. Everybody look out. You're going to want to get off Threads. You're going to want to get off Twitter. You're going to want to get off Instagram because the highlights are going to be flying all over the place.
Oh, yeah. The first second the inactives come out 90 minutes before week 1, and it says
Zonovan Knight's in there. You're going to tweet at me. You're going to start it. You're going to quote tweet it and be like, "Oh, yeah?
Flame this guy. Flame this guy right now."
It's going to be insane.
That's funny. With Michael Carter, though, instead of trying to project stats, because that's just such a weird thing to do, I projected a role. And I wrote, looks to enter camp as RB2, but could be quickly pushed by either Knight or Abanikanda if he isn't his best self. And for those reasons, I did put him in a solid bucket. I have more faith in him than I think you do. Based on his 2021 tape, I'm going to excuse his ankle last year. I don't think he ever got back to form. But over 16 games last season, he had 402 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. He was 41 of 48 in the pass game for 288 yards and another touchdown on the ground. So he scored 4 total touchdowns. He led the team in missed tackles forced with 31. Obviously, I think Breece Hall would have done that if he stayed healthy all season, but it goes to show that Michael Carter can get down and dirty inside the tackles, which I think is his best asset. He was first in team carries, but second in yards and touchdowns. He has a heavy pass game usage. He was 5th in team targets with an 85.5% catch percentage. So for all those reasons, I think, like we said about Abanikanda, Rodgers could cling to Michael Carter really easily, and he could become that guy. And another running back that you didn't mention from Green Bay is Jamal Williams. He was another guy that I think Michael Carter is more comparable to compared to Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon. So I kind of like if he could have a Jamal Williams type role. I know he poached 16 touchdowns in Detroit his first season,
I think it was 18. Please be respectful.
It's absolutely silly how many touchdowns he had. But I think Michael Carter could do that. And I think stylistically, yes, Bam Knight is what you want in that wide zone. Let's get outside, put your foot in the ground and cut up and go. But when you can't do that all the time, you got to get inside the tackles and Breece Hall's tired. I think Michael Carter could be that guy. So I did put him in the solid bucket, but I can understand why there are question marks. I just don't think there's enough question marks for me to dock him a whole tier for that. So I put him in solid.
One thing that I think is really important for this conversation is Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett have they have a working relationship. They've worked together in different places, right? They worked together in Green Bay. Now they're going to work together here in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Look at what they did in Green Bay. In Green Bay, Aaron Jones is considered one of the best running backs in the game. They still used A.J. Dillon a lot.
Yes.
It was a true, we're going to use both of these guys. So just because we all feel like Breece Hall can be the Aaron Jones to this offense, and I'm not comparing Breece Hall to Aaron Jones, I'm just using the comparison of the top guy in the offense. Guess what? Somebody's going to have to be the A.J. Dillon. Now, A.J. Dillon is a bigger back who can run people over, and they kind of used him late in games, second half, third and fourth quarter to kind of wear teams down. And I don't know if the Jets really have somebody that can fill that role, but they're going to want a complementary piece. They're going to use 2 backs. So there is an opportunity here for somebody to step up. And if Breece is going to be on a limited snap count, it might go as far as to be using 3 running backs in the early going. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity here on this team running the football and catching the ball out of the backfield in 2023. So it's going to be fascinating. One of the things to keep an eye on, I think, in training camp, the preseason battle, is who slots in behind Breece.
Yeah, absolutely. The running back battle, especially for the first few weeks of camp, is absolutely the number one battle, in my opinion, to watch. I just looked it up real quick, went back to 2021, the Packers rushing unit of A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. A.J. Dillon actually outpaced Aaron Jones by 4 yards. He had 803 and 5 touchdowns, and Aaron Jones had 799 and 4 touchdowns. The carry split 187 to 171. Then you go to 2022. I used 2021 because Hackett was there. But in 2022, very similar. AJ Dillon had 186 carries, for 770 yards and 7 touchdowns, while Aaron Jones had 213 carries, 1,121 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So 30 carries splitting them and 300 something yards splitting them, but they both were over 750 yards each of the last 2 years. That's what we need to see.
Yeah, the thing that's really important about that 2021 season, because that's the one that sticks out in my mind. I can remember like vividly games in which, in like the middle of the field, from the Green Bay 30 to like the start of the red zone, they used A.J. Dillon in that area like exclusively. And like if you had Aaron Jones on your fantasy team, you're watching the Green Bay Packers and you're like, they're just giving all these carries to A.J. Dillon in this space, and he's just taking off. And then they would get into the red zone, and then that's where they would deploy Aaron Jones. So it's what they do. They are going to utilize 2 backs in this offense. And so, again, when you discuss training camp battles to keep an eye on, and there's not a lot of them, I think, on this team, this is one. Like, this is a big one of who's going to slot in behind Breece Hall. Because, again, assume full health, Breece Hall's the RB1. Who's going to slot in behind him and to take on that complementary role? I'm going to be fascinated to see how it plays out.
100%. We got a comment in here from Dom C. What's up, Dom? He said that's a spot on point. Hackett runs a run first oriented offense. Cook or Fournette would be ideal second fiddles. I do agree with that. I am confident if they don't go the veteran route and take a second, but like we've said the past couple of weeks on this podcast, Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall would be RB1 in the entire league as far as a running back room.
Yeah, Dalvin Cook's an interesting case, right? Because this is a guy who I don't think needs to be in a complimentary role. He was a 1,000-yard rusher each of the last 2 seasons. I still think there's a lot left in Dalvin Cook's tank. Like, he's been really good, and I still think he's got a lot to offer a team. So if they brought him in, then I think you're looking at Dalvin Cook and Breece Hall, and I don't know where the rest of the snaps are going to go, right? We just talked about having 2 running backs. That's great. But then your RB3 is probably going to be Michael Carter, and then I don't know where Zonovan Knight and Israel Abanikanda kind of fit in there with that group. So, I understand why the Dalvin Cook thing has been popular because the rumors just won't go away. I just think I would be really surprised if Dalvin Cook ended up on the New York Jets. It would be a pleasant surprise, but I would be surprised if he ended up on the New York Jets.
Sure. And one last thing while we're talking about the offense Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers ran, Bobby Peters, he puts out offensive manuals.
Yes.
This is I've learned so much from this book in the last couple months of reading it. Got it for my birthday in March, and it's probably been the biggest resource knowing that Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett were going to be heading our offense. So I advise everybody to go over on Amazon and get that for like $20. It's a good read.
I will tell you, I'll add another recommendation from Bobby. He did one on the 2022 Dolphins.
Oh, yeah.
Mike McDaniel and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Tua. That's also a great read. One of my good friends who covers the Dolphins, Kyle Krabs, swears by it. Every time I talk to him, we talk about that book. He loves it. So that's one that you can look up as well. But yeah, lots of great content over there.
Absolutely. All right. Now, the main guy in the running back room, Breece Hall. We had to get here eventually.
I hate what I did. I hate what I did here.
Did you have a last second change of heart?
No, he's still in because you and I discussed pre-show where I had him and what I was thinking about doing. He's still where I originally had him, but I don't love it. I hate it.
All right, well, let's let you explain your thoughts because I feel confident where I put him, but I know you're a bit conflicted.
I have Breece Hall in the good to great tier. The 4. I like Breece Hall. I really like Breece Hall. My guy only played in like 7 games last year. He's coming off a major knee injury. Like, I don't want to put him in the questions bucket because that feels like really unfair. And I also don't know if solid really truly defines what Breece Hall meant to the team. I'm so conflicted about this. None of these buckets fit Breece Hall right now. None of them. So I'm going to keep him where I have him in the good to great, but I'm just going to make it very clear. I don't love it. It's a small sample size. He's coming off an injury. I have question marks of what he looks like in this new, different offense, but those 7 games were electric. And like, I don't know what you do. You got to put him somewhere. And so I put him in the good to great. I cannot put him in the franchise bucket. All the things I just mentioned, I couldn't get there.
All right, I agree. I had him in the good to great. I was conflicted as far as, do I put him franchise? But for those reasons that you said, 6 games, it's so hard to say that. But if he played the full season, I have like no doubts that he would be
Slam dunk.
a franchise pick.
It would be easy,
so,
but I can't because we didn't get there. He played 6 games. He's hurt. New offense. Like, those are the things that stop me from getting there. I want to be there, but those are the things that stop me from getting there.
Yes, and like you said, his knee injury is very scary. Obviously, the science and the recovery behind it has changed in the last couple of years, like the past decade, but that still doesn't mean he's going to be Breece Hall of those 6.5 games as soon as he steps on the field for the Jets. So I would play it slow, like we said in the beginning. I'm not going to put him on the pup to miss 6 games guaranteed, but I'm going to slow play that and do as much as I can to work him in slowly. But let's go over some stats. Last year, 7 games, 80 carries, 463 yards, 4 touchdowns. He had 30 targets, 19 catches, 218 yards, and a touchdown. His last 4 games, he had 59 carries, 351 yards, which was 6.5 per carry, 4 touchdowns, 6 receptions for 117 yards, which is just shy of 19 per catch. He was first in the NFL in yards per carry at 5.8 on the season. I know 80 carries doesn't meet a lot of the thresholds, but still over a large enough sample size, 6 yards per carry is special. 24 missed tackles forced. So we talked about Michael Carter. He had 31 over 16 games. Breece had 24 over 7. That's just kind of a scary trajectory of how many tackles he could have actually broken. 15 runs of 10 or more yards, 8 of 15 or more yards. It's so compelling to put him in the franchise if he had the whole season.
If he played in 12 games, I could put him in the franchise.
Exactly.
But it's such a small sample size in the context of the National Football League. It's less than half a season. Less than half a season. You want me to put him in the franchise bucket that he did it in half a season as a rookie? Again, Michael Carter, he didn't have a Breece Hall season, but he had a great rookie season.
Right.
And look at what happened in 2022. So it's just like, I want to be there, but I just can't. If I'm going to be intellectually honest and consistent here and really, truly look at this and try to be an unbiased observer of this team, then I think there's a limit. And I even think the good to great might be pushing it a little bit, but I feel comfortable enough with it just because of how good he was in those games. Also, we just spent 33 minutes discussing the running back room, and I love it. I love it.
There was a little bit of fluff in the beginning, but yeah, we spent a lot of time on the running backs. One more quick note, going back to his 2021 season for Michael Carter. He was the leader in carries, yards, and 3 other running backs on the team had a large workload. We still had Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson, even Austin Walter had some carries down the stretch. So Michael Carter has that ability to be that guy. But I thought it was crazy. That year, Carter and Elijah Moore led the team as rookies in their respective rushing and receiving yards. The Jets almost doubled up and did it again with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. If Breece didn't get hurt, Garrett Wilson broke Elijah Moore's by far. I think Elijah had 600 something, and Breece would have broke Michael Carter 630 in his rookie year. So it's kind of crazy that the Jets doubled up on playmakers, but like Joe Douglas said and Rob Saleh said, you can't have enough playmakers. Moving on to the next position, wide receiver, playmakers again. I mean,
can we group some of these guys together and just
yes, we're going to talk about
these guys go in this bucket and we can move on.
We're going to talk about Irvin Charles, Xavier Gibson, Malik Taylor, Deontay Spencer, Jerome Cap, all within 30 seconds. They're practice squad at best. They're not going to make this team.
Give me those names again. Let me just cross-reference to make sure that we agree.
Yep. Irvin Charles.
Yep.
Xavier Gibson.
Yep.
Malik Taylor.
Yep.
Deontay Spencer.
Yep.
Jerome Cap.
Yep. I've got them all as practice squad guys.
Okay, cool. We can move on from them until they prove themselves. I'm sorry. We can't talk about wide receiver 10 in too much length. That leaves me to wide receiver 7. I don't think the Jets are going to carry 7. I think they're going to carry 6 with the potential to even carry 5.
I agree. I have 6 receivers that did not make the practice squad tier. So yes, I have 6 receivers making the team.
Because of the running backs and the tight end situation, I think they're going to have to carry more there. You're going to have to carry less wide receivers because you're going to carry the same amount of offensive linemen you do every year. Zach Kazani,
I don't even know how many tight ends they're going to carry. That's another whole problem.
Exactly, and we'll get into that at the back end of this show. But it's going to be interesting to see the roster gymnastics to get to 53. Their new coach, Zach Azani, He takes over. He comes over from Denver with Nathaniel Hackett. He takes over for Miles Austin, who was suspended 1+ years for violating the gambling policy, which I still think is a little absurd because it was just a sports book, like gambling game. It wasn't even on a sport. But like I said, I think the Jets will carry 6 with the potential to practice squad a handful. That leads me to number 7, still in the practice squad bucket, below a UDFA from this season. I put him. We can start the debate. Denzel Mims, wide receiver 7 for me. Former second-round pick, has less receiving touchdowns than Zach Wilson and Devin Smith in his Jets career. 44% catch rate in 2022. I'm not even going to list his stats because they're embarrassing. 676 career receiving yards with no touchdowns. And each season his drops have increased by 1, 2, and 3. So the larger workload, the larger amount of drops for Denzel Mims. I don't have too much to say. I've been optimistic as long as I can. Jason Brownlee excites me a little bit more than him, so that's the only reason I put him down at the bottom. But you can go ahead and tell me why he's going to maybe stick around.
I think Denzel Mims is going to be the wide receiver 5 on this team. I think he's either the wide receiver 5 or the wide receiver 6. I think that's where he slot in.
Over Cobb?
It's Randall Cobb. He's 130 years old.
The money.
If they're both going to be on the team, who cares about the money? He's 430 years old. No offense to Randall Cobb. I'm glad he's here. He's going to help install the offense. But he's 400 years old. Denzel Mims has got to be in front of Randall Cobb on the depth chart. That's why I think he could be wide receiver 5. He went to special teams last year. Now, listen, the drops are a problem. The coming into games and immediately committing penalties is a problem. We can talk about all of those things. But the New York Jets, at every turn, have given Denzel Mims opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. Why do we think that that's going to stop? When he asked for a trade, they respectfully said, no, we're not going to trade you. That's because they clearly feel like they can get something out of Denzel Mims. And I'm here to tell you, would it surprise anybody that Aaron Rodgers is the guy that could make Denzel Mims a little bit of a thing? Would it surprise anybody? It wouldn't surprise me. Do I think he's going to have the opportunity to do so? No. Unless an injury happens. I've got 4 guys in front of him on the depth chart. But I do not see a world in which the New York Jets are going to cut Denzel Mims because he's shown a willingness to go play special teams. That's valuable to the New York Jets. You got to have guys that are willing to go out there and play special teams. He's done it. He has had zero issue with it. And I think they're going to try to find some role for him at some point and to be insurance in case of an injury. So I think he makes the team. I agree with you about Jason Brownlee, but I have him as a cut player because they can't carry 8 wide receivers. We're running out of roster spots.
Yeah, and I will say on a positive note before we move off Mims, if Nathaniel Hackett wants to instill that tall ball type of mentality on offense like he did in Denver, you look at Tim Patrick, Courtland Sutton. Exactly. Then you look at a guy like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. They have the same type of body. I don't know if Denzel Mims could be that type of downfield threat that Marquez Valdez-Scantling was for Aaron Rodgers, but when they were clicking, and MVS was pretty special in Green Bay. So I think that would be like the hopeful ceiling of Denzel Mims. But yes, I agree. It's hard. It's so hard to cut him, but I mean, there's just too much elsewhere to make it that he can stick on my 53. That leads me to wide receiver 6, Jason Brownlee, this year's UDFA from Southern Mississippi. Last year, in 13 games, he had 891 yards and 8 touchdowns on 55 catches. He's a practice squad / cut guy for me as wide receiver 6, but I think he could make the team based on his special teams role. I know he was working out as a special teams player in the offseason. There's a lot of Twitter videos circulating of him playing special teams. So we'll see if he sticks on. He'd probably be the guy that would push Denzel Mims for me. I don't think other than that, they could both be cut. Like you said, keep 5 wide receivers, but Jason Brownlee comes in at 6 for me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think Randall Cobb, the money's absolutely going to be on this roster. Where he fits on the depth chart, it's whatever. He's in the yellow questions bucket for me as well. So I think when you look at this, it's Denzel Mims and Jason Brownlee, maybe Xavier Gibson battling it out for that last spot on the roster. I just think it goes to Mims because of the history. And I think once Mims is on the roster, I think he slots above Randall Cobb because of what he offers the team. But that's a training camp battle way down the roster to pay attention to of who makes the team at the wide receiver position outside of the big guys. But it is one to keep an eye on.
It's definitely a sneaky one because, like you said, Randall Cobb's money doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. If he's just here to help bring guys along in the offense and sit back and take a very lessened role, hey, Denzel Mims will get that time to shine. Like you said, I have Randall Cobb as well in the yellow bucket. Too many questions. He's old. I mean, I'm not going to put him as a practice squad because of the money they gave him, but he $2.8 million is 22nd highest on the team. Last year, he had 34 catches for 417 yards and only one touchdown. He's a reliable third down, red zone guy. Like, if Randall Cobb was in that Vikings game, Braxton Berrios, instead of Braxton Berrios, we'd probably catch that touchdown and win the game. So that's how I feel about Randall Cobb. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have any heightened feelings towards him other than being wide receiver 5 at best.
Yeah, agreed 100%. He makes the yellow bucket for me. He's there to be a veteran presence, to help with the installs every single week, just be basically an extension of the coaching staff. And there's value to that. And I think he's going to be on the team because of that.
Absolutely. Jets Lounge checking in saying, hey, what's up, Jets
Hello,
Lounge?
Jets
How
Lounge.
we doing?
Hello.
All right, now we get into the top 4 at the position. I have Mecole Hardman as my 4th wide receiver. I put him in the solid bucket. Free agent from Kansas City, 1 year, up to $6.5 million deal. His cap hit is only $1.77 million this season. 25 catches, 297 yards, 4 touchdowns, with 2 rushing touchdowns added on last season for a total of 6. And that was only in 8 games. So he has the knack for finding the end zone. When the Jets signed him, they did say that they want to develop him as a full receiver, develop his route tree, get him going more than just a one-trick pony. I'm not quite sure he gives you the special teams value that everybody loves. He only has 1 kick return or punt return touchdown in his whole career. Maybe he can flip the field in a different perspective without scoring, but I don't see him necessarily being the primary kick returner unless things, kind of hit the fan. So for me, he's just a solid wide receiver 4, and he'd probably be the first guy up with an injury to the top guys.
We agree 100%. I have him as the wide receiver 4. I have him in the solid bucket. He's the first guy up in an injury. He's added depth to this room. We don't need to say anymore. We agree 100% on Mecole Hardman.
Perfect. This one gets really interesting.
Oh, this is easy. This is an easy decision.
You think so?
I think it's super simple.
All right, I'm going to let you lead this one off then. Who do you think is the wide receiver? Because this is a battle to me. I think the wide receiver 2 behind Garrett Wilson is a battle. Allen Lazard or Corey Davis. I'm not going to say who I have there first, but who do you have as wide receiver 2?
It's Allen Lazard for me. And it's Allen Lazard for a couple of different reasons. It's Allen Lazard because I think there's more of a reliability factor with Allen Lazard than there is with Corey Davis, right? Availability is your best ability in the National Football League, and Corey Davis has shown that he just misses time. He's had this weird thing since coming to the Jets, Corey Davis has, where he just drops passes like at random times. It's very weird. It's very odd. It's never consistent. He just randomly will drop one. And with Lazard, that chemistry with Rodgers matters when doing this and when looking at this. And I think in the early going, while he's developing that chemistry with Garrett Wilson, and it certainly feels like that's going pretty well from all indications so far, the person that he doesn't have to build that chemistry with because it's already there because they worked for the last couple of years is Allen Lazard. And do you know who also has that chemistry with Allen Lazard in terms of being a play caller and drawing up plays on offense? Nathaniel Hackett. And so for me, when I look at this, if this offense is going to work and be extremely efficient in the early going, and it is going to the train's going to leave the station at a decent enough speed to where this offense flows the way it's supposed to, it's going to be because Allen Lazard is going to be, I think, the second option after Garrett Wilson. And I would argue at times, Allen Lazard might be the more targeted option in the early going than Garrett Wilson while they're trying to piece all this together. So for me, it's a no-brainer. The injuries with Corey Davis, I think the chemistry that Lazard has with Rodgers, I think those are the two big things. Again, I think Corey Davis is a great player, and the fact that he's back and they didn't cut him is a shock to me. Thought they were just going to move on from the money. So they clearly feel like there's a role for Corey, and I think there is. But for me, it's Corey Davis as wide receiver 3. It's Allen Lazard as wide receiver 2. They're both in the solid bucket. They're both in that green 3 solid bucket for me, but that's how I have it split up.
So I agree with everything you said from the trust perspective. Allen Lazard has Rodgers' full trust. There's no denying that. And yes, he could even be wide receiver 2, maybe even wide receiver 1B. I hope he doesn't get to be the just outright wide receiver 1 in terms of target share out the gates because Garrett Wilson is just too special for that, and Aaron Rodgers will realize that. With all that being said, I have Corey Davis as the wide receiver 2 based on the trust he has from inside the building. I understand he has to earn Rodgers' trust and build a rapport with them, but they've said nothing but good things about Corey Davis. And I think, yes, he has durability issues. He has the drops, which just come at terrible times. But overall, him and Lazard are not very dissimilar in terms of catch percentage. And I think when you look at the talent of Corey Davis, he has a little bit more talent than Allen Lazard. They're both probably top half of the league in run blockers, maybe even top 10 in run blocking at their position because they're just so like big and physical. It's close. And I think this is another wide receiver or another battle, to watch in camp alongside the running backs. You have this running back group or wide receiver group because we know Garrett Wilson's special. He's going to go for like 14, 15, whatever. How many 100 yards?
I don't want to spoil it, but I'll do it here. We both have, I'm going to speak for you here, so please correct me if you disagree. We both have Garrett Wilson in the franchise bucket.
Easy.
He's awesome. He's one of the best young receivers in the game. He's clearly the best receiver on this team. I think we can save the spiel there with Garrett Wilson, how good he is. But after him, to your point, I think there is a battle. I will completely concede that I don't think it's clear cut that it's Lazard or Corey Davis.
Yes.
I just think the edge is going to go to Lazard in the early going. But if it's Corey Davis, that's great. I think all three of these guys can be extremely productive and create just a ton of problems. Because I think what defenses are going to do in the early going, and this isn't really kind of what we're doing here with the summer ranking series, but I'll talk about it here anyway. Teams in the early going are going to do everything in their power to make sure Garrett Wilson doesn't beat them.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good luck with that because Allen Lazard is a very competent wide receiver. Corey Davis is a very competent wide receiver. Those guys can both take plays big. So to me, this is going to be tough. Is it the best wide receiver room in football? No, I think I had it rated like middle of the road, like 17th or 18th in the league. But is it good enough to create a ton of challenges for opposing defenses? Absolutely. Specifically because of the attention that teams are going to try to pay towards Garrett Wilson. Or if you don't do that, leaving Garrett Wilson in a one-on-one situation to me feels like a nightmare. It feels like you're setting yourself up for failure. So I think this group's going to be fascinating to watch how it all comes together.
The one thing that I will say, because there is a way to get all three of these guys on the field, Wilson, Davis, Lazard. Put Lazard in that big slot option, and I feel like you have a core three. Like we said, Cole could be that guy off the bench. He's not your primary slot, although his size technically says he is your slot guy. Allen Lazard is a big slot in Nathaniel Hackett's offense where he likes to play that tall ball. Yeah, he utilized a lot of tight ends in Denver. I know they weren't really like the best tight ends in Denver, but they had like 4 tight ends suit up every single week. And if Allen Lazard could just be another one of those guys, not attached to the formation, but he motions in and he becomes basically like that sniffer, that H-back type of guy who's going to lay a block. I'm excited to see all three of them on the field at the same time. So if we can make that work, let's go. So I'm glad that we disagreed a little bit on wide receiver 2. Obviously, we don't disagree on wide receiver 1. Garrett Wilson, what's up?
One more thing on Lazard, and you kind of mentioned it there. The run blocking that Allen Lazard provides might be the thing that gives him the edge over Corey Davis, is how effective he can be in the run game. Because I think a lot of people made the assumption of, they just brought in Allen Lazard because he was with Aaron Rodgers last year. Now, I don't know how much of it is lip service, but there were a ton of reports that came out after the Jets were pursuing Lazard that said, even if they don't land Aaron Rodgers, Lazard was one of their top free agent targets in the offseason because they thought he fit exactly what they needed in terms of a run-blocking wide receiver. And so, to me, that might be the thing that gives him the edge. Something just to keep an eye on is they really, really, really love the run-blocking ability from Allen Lazard because he is willing to get in there and scrap and just be physical, and that's something you need if you're going to break big plays for Breece and Michael Carter and the entire running back.
I don't think anything will ever be funnier than him getting penalized unsportsmanlike conduct for counting the 3 defenders that he blocked on the same play and put them all on their ass. I agree. He's going to be a dog in this offense. Garrett Wilson, number 1 guy, franchise, easy.
Amazing.
Had almost 140 targets last year, 1,103 yards, 4 touchdowns, only had 2 drops all season in week 2 and week 4. When you're talking about having the 40th best quarterback room in the NFL.
Right. My guy had 140 targets with Zach Wilson and Mike White and Joe Flacco and Chris Stravler throwing in the ball.
I think about the Miami game, week 18 or whatever, the very last week of the season. Joe Flacco dropped back, 3-step drop, and threw it to Garrett Wilson every single play anyway. He had 18 or 17 targets, a season high, and nobody could stop him. He still ended with just shy of 90 yards on the day. So it's just silly that all 22 people on the field could know it's going to Garrett Wilson, and it's really still hard to stop him. He did have a 5-game stretch last season where he played 97% of the snaps. He had 91% of the snaps played since week 6. I use this because Mike LaFleur didn't play him week 1 over Lawrence Cager. So, questionable things there. He had a 23.3% target share, which is second behind Breece Hall, which if Breece Hall played a full season, that number would have came down and Garrett probably would have been number 1. His floor, dude, is like the great side of good great. Like, I don't know. He's just so special. Like, maybe injuries derail him, but like, I just don't see it with Rodgers. You upgrade at quarterback. You're in the second year of the system. He said he put on some weight to be a more physical player. You can contort your body and come down with catches that special, and you're just adding mass. I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more to say. He's one of the best young receivers in the game. He had a historic, in the context of Jets history, historic rookie campaign. He is the number 1 option for this team. He's, again, one of the best young wide receivers, and he's on a path. If he does what he did last year, this year, he's on a path to being a guy we talk about in that tier of true wide receiver ones in the National Football League that are absolute nightmares for opposing defensive coordinators.
Mm-hmm.
They are the guy that the defensive coordinator is staying up until 3 a.m. figuring out how the heck am I going to get my defense to stop this guy. We are on that level of path. He's got to do it again this year. But if he does it for 2 straight seasons and puts up these kinds of numbers and potentially grows off of what he did his rookie season, we will be talking about Garrett Wilson in that elite tier of wide receiver.
Yeah, I think this year, not like a hot take or anything, I think Garrett exceeds 100 catches and 10 touchdowns. I think the 10 touchdowns is probably the hotter part of that take, but 100 catches in this offense is pretty simple for him to get with 83 he had last year. He could easily get 17 more with Rodgers. So good to put a bow on the wide receiver discussion there. Now, the last group of the night, tight ends. Easily,
I don't freaking know what to do with this group, man.
It's a very hard group to bucket because you feel like your bias of your fan of the team, your homerism, so to speak.
The two guys I like might not make the roster. The 2 guys in this position group that I like the most might not make the team.
That's really exciting. I
don't know what to do.
I did put the consensus rankings together, so I'm interested to see who those guys specifically are. But before we get into the bottom of the roster, Coach Ron Middleton, easily the most likable coach on the entire team. Everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. That's just, I have the shirt. I bought it right away. I couldn't stop myself. It's the greatest shirt. I think they're going to carry 4. Like we talked about with the wide receivers and the running backs. It's such a weird position to be in. I'm betting on Nathaniel Hackett wanting to go big with his tight ends and tall wide receivers, so I'm kind of sticking with that theme. I have 4 because you can't put one specific on the practice squad. But let's talk about the 2 guys that I have in the red bucket, the practice squad bucket, Isaiah Gathings and Kenny Yeboah. Although I do like Kenny Yeboah, I don't know if there's room for him here.
Sorry, Kenny. We don't have space. We don't have space
that special preseason. I think it was 2021. I think when he was a rookie, and it was fun. It was exciting. He caught like a Hail Mary or something like that. It was really fun to watch. But it's hard when you're stacked up in this room that's kind of loaded with upside talent. That Kenny Yeboah is just probably not going to make it for me. That leads me to tight end number 4, this year's 7th round pick, Zach Kuntz. I have him in the yellow bucket. Obviously rookie. Last year with Old Dominion, he got hurt, played 5 games, only had 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. But the year before that, in a full season, 13 games, he had 73 catches, 692 yards, and 5 touchdowns. So kind of a workhorse. He's an athletic specimen, just perfect RAS.
Tools,
6 foot.
Tools.
100%.
His RAS score is absurd. My guy is an athletic freak. The Jets just sat back in the 7th round. They're like, you know what? Let's get this guy with a super high RAS score and just see what happens.
Yep. Not to mention he's like 6'8".
He's huge. He's massive. He's that big and he has that good of a RAS score. It's absurd.
Yep. So
that's what makes, but he's absurd.
Exactly. The rawness is what makes it hard to bucket him and say he's going to make the 53 or not. Right now I have him projected to make the 53 solely on the fact of if you put this guy on the practice squad, how quickly is he poached? And I think it's going to be quick. So there's a reason they invested a draft pick in him. Middleton, in his interview with Eric Allen for the Team podcast, mentioned that Zach Kuntz won the interview, not even from a football perspective, but from a a human perspective. So that adds a lot of the elements. He said now Zach Kuntz has to go out and prove that to me, and he kind of chuckled. But I think Zach Kuntz could do it. Obviously, don't expect much from him this season. I don't think it'll be as bad as like the Ruckert rookie season, but he might be that guy on the inactive list every week where it's like, God damn it, let's get this guy on the field. But looking ahead, Jeremy Ruckert. Obviously he's your number 3, right? Or do you have him higher?
I have Zach Kuntz as my tight end 4.
Mm-hmm.
I love Zach. I have him in the yellow bucket because he's a rookie. I have Jeremy Ruckert as my tight end 3.
Okay, cool.
I love Jeremy Ruckert.
Same.
He's in the yellow bucket because
yes.
we just don't know. We don't know. But coming out of college, this is a guy who is a fantastic blocker at Ohio State. Absurd. Was amazing in the run game as a blocker. The questions surrounding Jeremy Ruckert coming out in that draft class was, is this guy good enough right now as a pass catcher? Because in that Ohio State offense, they just don't utilize the tight ends as a top end passing option. So there's just not a lot of volume. There's not a lot of reps where you can see if Jeremy Ruckert is a good route runner, if how good are his hands, those types of things that are really, really important, contested catch, all that kind of stuff. You just didn't have good enough volume. I'll tell you, the reps that I did see, specifically down in the red zone, Jeremy Ruckert looks like a guy that can play. He looks like a guy that if develops over the next couple of years, he's the starting tight end. The thing that gets in the way here is the Jets have 2 young tight ends that I would love for them to invest in and develop in Jeremy Ruckert and Zach Kuntz. They're spending a gajillion dollars on the 2 guys that leave this room, and I just don't see a way for these 2 guys to get on the field. And I'll believe it when I see it. I have a real tough time thinking the New York Jets are going to have on the 53 4 tight ends and dress 2 of them.
Right.
What are they going to do here?
Yeah, that's really tough. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett could just go 13 personnel and make it work.
Let's go. I'm in. Sign me up.
I'm in
Sign
too.
Me up.
Give me all the blockers for Breece Hall. I'm cool with that. I have Ruckert, tight end 3, questions bucket. I put him at tight end 3, but I said by season's end, he could be tight end 2 with his opportunities to block. If you show him as a blocker and a pass catcher, a complete player, I think he has the ability to edge out a guy like CJ Uzomah. But that being said, when you have all that money invested into Uzomah and Conklin, they're both top 10 paid on the roster in terms of salary cap, and they keep kicking the money down the road. It's really tough, but I want to see – this is the guy that I'm like – when I go to camp, I want to see Jeremy Ruckert and what he can do, because what we saw in that Miami game was special. Right back to what you saw as a scouting report in Ohio State, his blocking, his just tenacity, it's right there. It was like, why the hell didn't we play him earlier if this is what we're going to get from him? Obviously, 1 catch, 8 yards on 2 targets isn't enough to say anything. So he's questions. That leads us to the top 2 guys, Tyler Conklin, CJ Uzomah. I feel like the order of these guys doesn't matter, but you can make a compelling case that Uzomah could be closer to the tight end 1. Obviously, when you look at it last year, 552 yards for Conklin, 232 yards for Uzomah on half the receptions. It doesn't seem that way, but I feel like Uzomah can actually push Conklin as a tight end 1. So my projected role would be tight end 1B, who will be used much more. An excellent blocker and has already developed a rapport with Rodgers both on and off the field. He would be one of my sleepers for 2023. I think he's going to have 50 catches and 400 plus yards. That's my prediction for CJ Uzomah.
They're both in the green solid bucket for me. That's how I view them both.
I bury the weed. They're both solid.
I have it the same way you have it. I have CJ Uzomah as tight end 2, and I have Tyler Conklin as tight end 1. I think CJ was brought in here as a really high upside option for the Jets, but also I think he was brought in here to be a good culture fit and to really help Robert Saleh and company turn this culture around. And he's delivered that. He's that guy that you see pumping everybody up. You see being the guy that's energetic, and there's value in having a guy like that on the team when you are trying to rebuild something. From a volume perspective, this was Tyler Conklin's team as the tight end. He got all the volume. He got all of the targets. And so I don't see a reason for why that can't continue. He's been good in that role. I know he had the drops at times last year, and it was kind of brutal, but I still think he's the tight end 1 on this team. I think they're going to utilize both guys, and both guys are going to have a role. And so these are your 2 tight ends on this team. Right now, I'll default to what it was last year, where Tyler Conklin gets more of the workload. If CJ Uzomah got more of the workload, I think we'd all be fine with that. These are both guys that are solid options. Why they're in the same bucket, and they're both good players for the New York Jets. So I have it as Conklin 1, CJ Uzomah 2. It could flip at some point during the season. It could stay exactly the way it did last year, and I think both guys can be extremely productive in this offense.
Exactly. I think Conklin could even be a 750-yard type of player in this offense. Not saying that they'd split carries or split the role and get that much production, but if he was to be the favorite again in like a 70-30 split, I see no reason why he couldn't break 750 yards. I thought it was really funny. His final season in Minnesota, 87 targets, 61 catches, 593 yards, and 3 touchdowns. His first season with the Jets, 87 targets, 58 receptions, 552 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So like this guy's basically been consistent the last 2 seasons. That's kind of, I'm not going to say it's his floor, but if you're going to continue on this pace, 500 yards isn't easy for Tyler Conklin, and CJ Uzomah picking it up and giving you more production would just be that much better to round out the group. Like I said, they're going to keep 4. I think that's kind of maybe 3, but I think 4 has got to be it. And Kuntz is the one that's kind of straggling. Any final thoughts to this entire thing now that we have quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end done?
Well, what are we going to talk about? Are we going to talk about Nick Bodwin? We can get the fullback love in here to close out the show.
Oh shoot, they still have Nick Bowden, don't they? They do. Okay, that's easy. I have him as a practice squad cut guy.
Well, come on, they're gonna have a fullback on the roster.
Jeremy Ruckert. I feel like if that's the only case.
If they didn't do that last year, they're not going to do it this year. They're not just going to all of a sudden decide to do. I love it because it's a way to get them on the field. But like, I don't know if I have them as questions. Like, I don't have them ranked very high. But we can't ignore. We're going to just do all of the skill players and quarterbacks. We're just going to skip over the fullback position. We can't do that.
Shit, you got me. I forgot the most skilled guy. I did have him as a practice squad cut guy. Yes, if they keep a true fullback, he's the only one they got. Last year he was on the IR. It's kind of funny that they brought him back again, minimal deal. But yes, if they keep a true fullback, that's the guy. I hope Ruckert's the guy. I mean, just keep giving those reps to Ruckert. I just feel like until he proves that he can't handle them, got to give them to him. So Nick Bowden, that's a good sneak in there. We can show the big screen here. I have it up. All of our consensus rankings. We did not come to consensus on Denzel Mims and Michael Carter. And now Nick Bowden, because you have him as a 2 and I have him as a 1.
I hate that.
But
I hate that.
Yeah, you thought we could get, just 2 disagreements. We have 3. But I think when it comes to Denzel Mims, I'm willing to go up to a questions for Denzel Mims.
Okay.
I'll fall back into that bucket. But I think the payoff needs to be.
You can have Michael Carter. I'll give it to you. I don't love it, and I'm not changing my opinions. Donovan Knight's the better running back entering 2023. But since you gave me Denzel Mims, I'll give you Michael Carter.
Cool, and as an added bonus, I gave you Nick Bowden because, like you said, it's just questions. He's the only true fullback, so they got to keep somebody.
I think I got the worst end of this deal with Denzel Mims and Nick Bowden, and you got Michael Carter. But hey, we'll just keep track as it goes on. Yeah, whatever.
It's going to be a fun series. I'm glad everybody's sticking around for it. Next week we have the offensive line. Next week at this time,
I'm looking at my list now for what we're going to discuss. We're going to be here forever.
We might be.
There's a lot of debate.
There's so many, not even camp battles, but just positions where it's like you could easily see a revolving door here, and this guy could go here, and then all of a sudden
three positions in which that could occur on the offensive line.
Exactly. It's so wild. I think the offensive line is going to be a great conversation. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight. You can follow JetNation on all social media platforms. I don't know if we're on Threads yet, but you can follow me on Threads at @DTerman on all social media platforms. Chris, I don't know if you're on Threads yet. I think you are, but you can follow him on Twitter at @ChrisSchubert_. What's the Threads handle? Shout it out.
I don't remember the Threads handle. It's my Instagram account, and my Instagram account is different than every other social media platform I use, so I don't remember. I'm on Threads. I have not sent, because do you send a thread? You send a tweet, but do you send a thread? Whatever that is for Threads, I haven't done it yet. I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I've posted a few. Haven't really gotten any traction yet, but
I'm lurking.
But we're just we're kind of like creeping up with the follower count there. We're hoping, we're just kind of monitoring Twitter and seeing what's going on with Threads and kind of one foot into both doors. You got to keep it going because I just want to stay into the loop with the Jets fans. I feel like all the banter is great, and I appreciate everybody's support tuning in tonight. Go check out Glenn's solo shows on Quentin Williams' extension deal he put out today, and I believe yesterday or Tuesday he put out Sauce and Asante Samuel, their beef and drama with Darrelle Revis as well. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of content coming over at JetNation at this time next week. We will be in camp 2 days after that show, we'll be literally at camp watching the Jets and Aaron Rodgers in the red penny, throwing it to all the guys. It's going to be real exciting. Appreciate everybody's support. Let's go Jets.